Good evening, Your Honor. Andy Tolsky on behalf of Space Jam: A New Legacy. Your Honor and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client has been accused of being a terrible movie. However, I am here in defense of said movie. So, without further ado, this court is now in session. Space Jam: A New Legacy. So Space Jam: A New Legacy is the 25 years in the making sequel to the 90s hit Space Jam. Now, I actually have made a video on this movie, because it's a nostalgic movie from my childhood. So yeah, I was curious about a sequel. So this Space Jam sequel stars LeBron James, superstar basketball player in this movie and in real life. His fictional son, Dom, is kidnapped by Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle plays this algorithm at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. And he's like, all right, LeBron James, you want your son back? You gotta beat me at a game of basketball. And so LeBron James teams up with the Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Lola Bunny, Porky Pig, and the rest, except for Pepe Le Pew. And now we have our Space Jam sequel, which has been sentenced to terrible reviews. I don't know what to say, man. I guess I was the one who enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't think my client is completely guilty here. I think y'all are being a little too harsh on this movie. First off, LeBron James, his acting is pretty decent, at least for what the movie requires of him. He plays the part well enough of a father who wants to get his son back, but of course there is more to the story than that. I'm not gonna get into it because that is kind of spoilerish. The kid, Cedric Joe is the young actor's name. I actually thought he wasn't that bad either. In fact, I thought this character had some depth to him, believe it or not. And of course, Don Cheadle was really good. Don Cheadle is a really charismatic actor. And so his character, Al G. Rhythm, which is a nice play on words, yeah, I thought he was a pretty fun villain. He had attitude, he had swagger, he had bad intentions, oh yeah, for sure. But what can I say? Don Cheadle looked like he was having fun filming this. And of course, in this movie, we're hanging out with the Looney Tunes characters again. I have no complaints about them here. Even when they're transformed into 3D versions of themselves, I thought the animation looked really good. They looked like themselves, just in CGI instead of hand-drawn animation. But of course, the thing most people are saying my client is guilty of is just being a big commercial for Warner Brothers IP, which stands for intellectual property. And you know what? Fine, I will admit that my client is not completely innocent in that respect. Cause it's true, there is Warner Brothers IP all over this movie. Throughout the film, you see things like Hanna-Barbera characters and the Iron Giant and DC characters, but people are saying that this feels like the point of the movie is to sell Warner Brothers IP, and to that I say, objection, Your Honor. Sure, there's a lot of Warner Brothers stuff in this movie, not unlike other films have done in the past. Ready Player One. Ralph Breaks the Internet did that with Disney properties. I didn't see anyone get down on Ready Player One for doing that. I do actually have a couple of defensive statements here. Exhibit A, this digital serververse in which most of the movie takes place is located at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. So no duh, big shock, you're gonna see a lot of Warner Brothers properties, cause that's just where the movie takes place. Now, of course, the writers of the movie didn't have to make it that way. They could have had the movie take place anywhere else, and therefore not feature so much Warner Brothers IP. And to that I say, alright, fine. But this is where Exhibit B comes in. For me, and I get that this is my objective opinion, but for me, all the Warner Brothers properties that we see throughout this film, they didn't feel like the main point of the movie. I'm being completely honest here. It made for an interesting setting, and of course my cinephile eyes were looking for any character that I would recognize. Like, hey, there's the mask, cool. But I'll be completely honest, the story of the movie, it did seem to take precedence here. It's a story about a father who wants his son back, and so he teams up with the Looney Tunes, and then zaniness ensues. You know, all sorts of Looney Tunes shenanigans that you would expect from the Looney Tunes. I found it entertaining. Sue me. I mean, this movie is not for, adults who are looking for a serious movie. No, not by any means. This is a kid's movie for kids. Get that into your heads, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Plus, it's a sequel to Space Jam, which in and of itself should tell you what kind of movie you're in for with A New Legacy. It's not gonna be serious. It's not taking itself seriously. It never promised to take itself seriously. Yes, this movie is filled with illogic. No duh. It's a Looney Tunes movie that's a sequel to Space Jam. If you're expecting anything else, then I would just have to consider you uneducated, cause you shouldn't expect this movie to be serious. And I'll be honest, I'm not even the biggest defender of this movie. The biggest defenders of this movie were the kids in the audience in which I saw this movie earlier today, because they absolutely loved it. These kids were in like 4th or 5th grade, and guess what? They were laughing, cheering, clapping throughout this entire movie. They were having a great old time. And so, Your Honor, I would say this movie is doing its job pretty darn well. Cause that is this movie's job, to be a kid's movie for kids. You know, like the original Space Jam was for me when I was a kid. Here's how it's gonna go down. In about 20 years, this movie is going to be just as nostalgic for those kids as the original one is to me now. And those kids are gonna look back on this movie and be like, oh yeah, my childhood. But in their maturity, they're going to recognize it's not the best movie in the world. It's not a serious movie. It's not gonna get a higher score rating on Rotten Tomatoes than it has now, which is somewhere in the 30s, but the movie did its job at entertaining them when they were kids. And that is what matters here, I think. And I'm not even gonna touch on the whole Lola Bunny sexualizing, non-sexualizing thing in this movie, because honestly, I never thought it mattered. She's still a character in this movie who's good at the hoops, and that's what matters. As for the music in this movie, yes, I will admit, Your Honor, that it's not as good as the music in the first movie, in my opinion anyway. That is where I will admit the 90s do kind of have a leg up, at least as far as nostalgia goes anyway, because that Space Jam song in the opening credits of the first movie is like iconic to me. But like I said, the music in this movie is going to end up being nostalgic for the kids who are watching this today. They're gonna end up with nostalgia for this music like I have nostalgia for the original music. That's just how it's gonna work. So in conclusion, Your Honor, my client, Space Jam: A New Legacy, is innocent. I had fun with this movie. It's not the deepest movie ever by any means. Cause again, it's a Looney Tunes movie, for crying out loud. It's zany, it's illogical, it's loony. But I found the story decent. I didn't think all the Warner Brothers IP felt like too much. It just made for an interesting setting to me. Plus, I thought a lot of the humor landed as well. I was laughing a lot throughout this movie. Like, out loud. It was funny. And guess what? Even the stuff I didn't find funny, guess who did find it funny? The kids. So this movie's doing something right, although the music was just okay. For Space Jam: A New Legacy, I will say, go see this movie while it's in theaters, as long as you are aware of what it is, which is a Looney Tunes movie that is a sequel to Space Jam, and therefore is promising to be nothing more or less than a kids movie for kids. So keep that in mind. The defense rests. And if I end up being the only one out there who liked this movie, then so be it. But I'm not going to apologize for giving my honest opinion. So, Space Jam: A New Legacy. Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.